Hey guys, Jacqueline here with Zenith Home Loans. So thank you for joining us for another one of our interview series. Today we're interviewing a former client of mine, and her name is Lauren Lombardi. And today she's actually going to talk a little bit about her experiences with making some career changes, especially as we're starting to see this great resignation with people in the marketplace as a result of the pandemic and a variety of other things, and just kind of how that impacted some of her home purchasing timeline, because a lot of those things did correspond there. So thank you, Lauren, for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Of course.
So why don't you just kind of jump in? I mean, this is a little bit more informal of a conversation meant to be very informative for people, but why don't you kind of just jump in and tell us about what you're seeing in the marketplace, and maybe any thoughts that you might have about this resignation that we're starting to see from people across the board?
Sure. So first off, I'll preface, I am not an HR professional or recruiter. So um, I can speak to my personal experience from what I've seen, but I don't have really an exact answer as to why people might be leaving their jobs. I know it's different for everyone. But what I saw since the start of 2020, I think just what we're hearing and what we're seeing is a lot of people were maybe awakened by the pandemic, and they came to realize they want more opportunity or favorable work conditions for growth. I can't speak to everybody with that statement, but that's just what the trend seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
And with that trend, I hope personally more and more companies, if they aren't already, are starting to say, hey, we should, survey our employees or check in on them and see what they want and how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
By doing that, I really think that is a win-win for employers and employees, because for one, that's showing that the employer is, more focused on retention. And that tends to involve maybe less resources up front versus acquiring new employees.
Mm-hmm.
And for employees, our jobs play a huge part in our lives. And I think it's fair to say everyone wants the best work conditions they can get. And I really do think the pandemic, for some reason, just woke everybody up when the whole world shut down. So that's just personally what I've seen. Again, I can't speak to that in terms of like my own experience, but I have had quite a few friends make some career changes as a result. And as someone who has work experience in the tech realm in more than one organization over the last couple of years, I, like you mentioned, Jacqueline, I made a career change during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just what I've seen, and that's just what I've heard friends express.
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't resonate necessarily for everybody, but that's just what I've viewed.
Yeah, I think as part of all of that, we're just starting to see a lot more people, because of the opportunities that the pandemic brought for working from home and working more of a remote status. I think it just kind of awakened, as you mentioned, a lot of questions by employees and being like, hey, why can't I do this more often? Or why can't there be a little bit more flexibility? And maybe just looking at it from the perspective of, we need to stop doing things just because we've always done it a certain way doesn't mean it always has to be done that way. Like, there's always room for growth. And there's some people who do better in certain work environments, and maybe they like being in the office every single day. Like, personally, that's my preference. I like being around people. Working from home just makes me feel really secluded and things like that. But some people do a lot better by being completely free from interruptions of other people walking by their desks and things like that. So I think you can see both sides of it. And I think to your point, there just needs to be maybe more flexibility and letting the employees have a little bit more say in, okay, what are my options? And if I'm still doing great work and my job's still getting done, like, who cares where I'm sitting while I'm doing it, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think, to your point, flexibility is the key word. I really see a lot of people wanting that, and I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so with your specific situation, we had a career change for you, or an employment change right around the same time we're talking about, hey, I want to buy a house. And so how did that kind of influence some of the decisions as far as like your timeline and things like that? Obviously, I know what it was like for my side, but I'd love to hear, because I get people a lot of times will ask me, be like, hey, I really want to buy a house, but also I'm currently interviewing for positions and things like that. So why don't you speak to that a little bit and kind of what your experience was there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll preface this by saying pre-COVID, pre-2020, I think it'll make more sense if I back it up a little bit here.
Sure.
I was completing grad school. I was getting my master's in health services administration.
Mhm.
And in 2019, I was scheduled to finish that in December of 2019. And I was like, okay, I was doing that all while I was working a marketing job. And I gained a lot of great experience from that marketing job. Going into that job and into that employer, I felt I was pretty transparent upfront, saying, hey, I'm in grad school right now to explore broader career opportunities outside of marketing. Like, my background's been marketing, healthcare marketing is really what I specialized in. And I want to understand the world of healthcare a little bit better, want to see what other career opportunities are out there. Hence why I'm getting my master's degree. And I was upfront about that. So that was pre-2020. I graduate December 2019, getting my years mixed up here. And of course, that happened right before the pandemic started. And working in healthcare, the whole industry took a pretty big hit. I know many industries did. And at that time, I was, after graduation, because I had that degree, I was like, what other opportunities outside of marketing are available, either within my organization or within, the industry? And it was a scary time for the industry because nothing was really available unless you are a first responder or a frontliner in early 2020, in March of 2020. And so when that happened, the opportunity at my organization at the time presented itself, like a new job opportunity within another department outside of marketing. And I was very lucky to take it, and I learned a lot from that as well. So that really was the start of that career change. I moved from marketing into data analytics and business intelligence, more of that sort of a focus. And they fit hand in hand. And I mean, I can speak highly to the experience I gained from both. And then that said, last year I switched organizations, and I just felt it was the right move for me. Continuing the experience I had gained from that career change into data analytics, and I've been very pleased with it. And so that's a little bit more background on that career change.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that? I can explain how that fits into like my home buying process now, if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. And just kind of talking through maybe like, was there any, like, cause I feel like with your and my conversation, there was some starting and stopping. So we were like, okay, let's talk about it. And then like, maybe it's not the right time. And so maybe speak to a little bit of what your personal, and obviously everybody's going to be a little bit different. I've had clients change jobs in the middle of a transaction. And if he's listening to this, you know who you are, because we talk about it all the time. But I've also had clients who are like, hey, what should I do? And so maybe speak to your personal preferences, maybe about what that experience was like as part of your home ownership journey.
Absolutely. So let me take a step back. I have to think about this. Knowing the approval process at that time, like to get pre-approved for a loan, I wanted to set myself up for success the best I could. I had, transparently speaking, I had paid off grad school at that point, which was step one. Two, I felt comfortable enough financially, but I was like with what I had, but I was also craving more of, a potential new opportunity. And I didn't want to start buying a home or beginning that process very seriously until I was comfortable in the role I was in. And I think in our early conversations, I was like, yeah, the interest rate's great right now. I don't want it to look bad to somebody like that I just switched jobs or switched career. Right. I kind of just want to get settled in my own career first before I start the process of buying a home.
Right.
And I was also, being perfectly honest, working in healthcare, I was scared for the state of healthcare and the economy. And I think a lot of people were, not just in healthcare, but just in general. So the fact that I wanted to feel a little bit more settled with where I was at in terms of job stability and career stability. And also I just was a little hesitant where the economy was at, given COVID
Right.
hit at the end
Right.
of, in 2020. I think that's where the starting and stopping happened. And then when I took on the role I have now, I felt very comfortable with it. I felt like, okay, I've hit these goals. I've paid off school. You know, this career change is underway. I feel more settled,
Mm-hmm.
like to start this next big chapter of my life.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
was a lot of, if you recall, it was a lot of like, do I do this? Do I not
Yeah.
do this?
Yeah.
Like the state of the world is so crazy right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think the timing always works out, and it worked out for the best.
Yeah. And I think you had some unique set of circumstances, because not only did you have this, maybe I'm going to have a career change, maybe I'm not, just trying to explore opportunities. But then on top of that, we also had everything going on with the aftermath of COVID and the pandemic and shutdowns and everything else. So you had just like this extra level of home buying stress in there that normally you would hope that we don't experience, but there was just a lot of factors in there. So that's really helpful, I think, for anybody who's considering both buying a house and making a career change at the same time. And really, it's just about like, okay, let's just talk through the conversations. Because what I believe I told you at the time is like, hey, you need to do what you feel is best for you, because ultimately you're the one who has to kind of carry on with these decisions that we're making when it comes to new income, new position, and all the stress that carries with it. We've got to go through HR and all of the training and that stuff. And then on top of it, I'm over here bugging you about paperwork, and we're buying a house and we've got inspections and everything else. So I think those are just really important things to consider as a part of it. It doesn't mean you clearly you did it and it was successful and everything else, not without its stress and stuff like that, obviously, but it is doable and it is possible. And so I certainly don't want that to ever be a stopping point for somebody. So thank you for speaking to that. That's certainly helpful. And so as somebody who is maybe looking to make a career change, were there any questions that you feel that maybe you asked your current employer, any research that you did that you feel like really helped you feel a lot more confident in your decision to move forward, or maybe questions you didn't consider asking in the past or things like that? Because I feel like a lot of people, especially as we see people making these bigger career moves and maybe doing the same type of role, but in a completely different industry and things like that. If you've never done something like that before, you don't necessarily know what questions should I be asking, what things should I be considering. So is there any like tips that you might have that were really beneficial for you in making those decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having your questions prepared before you go into an interview is extremely important. I'd always recommend to anybody, whether they're in my situation or not, like ask about growth opportunity up front.
Mm-hmm.
Ask about the day-to-day of the job. And I know those are standard interview questions I feel a lot of people might ask or already know to ask, but just understand like what benefits and what you're getting out of the job, like both financially, but also get as much information you can up front as to not only how you can contribute to the job, but also like how it kind of fits into your lifestyle as well. I think the employer relationship should be very two-way. And in my experience, I've been very thankful and grateful for that. So just ask the questions up front, what's growth opportunity? How does this company adapt to change? Like just kind of get as much information as you can up front to understand where the company has been and where it's planning to go and how you fit into that. So that's really vague, I feel like.
No,
but
I think that's helpful. I think that's something that, I mean, there's a lot of nerves and anxiety and stuff going into an interview. And like, I feel like those are easy things to forget to ask sometimes. I mean, it's been a really long time since I interviewed for a job. So that's why I'm asking these questions. I'm like, I don't even know what it's like to interview for a job anymore, because I've been doing this for so long. Is as far as any of your peers or maybe some of your friends or family members even that have made a job change, is there anything that they've shared that's like maybe was like a really awesome experience that they had as part of the interview process or the new hire process, or maybe something they wish they would have considered or asked or anything like that that you can impart on us?
I can think of a great example. I can speak to a friend who I met through volunteering here, who also,
Hmm.
like me, but we have never worked together. We've never worked in the same organization, had a marketing background and made the move into data science and data analytics.
Hmm.
And I was kind of a step ahead of him there because this was 2021. He was making the switch. I switched from marketing to data early 2020. And I mean, the questions, I'm trying to think back to your question here because this feels so long ago. So I'm trying to remember
Yeah.
everything. Um, I can't speak, to his experience, but I think just I would agree with him here. He found an organization that really values him and was like, hey, we have all this opportunity and this is how we want you to contribute to it. And just having an organization that was up front with him
Hmm.
um, made him feel really welcome, at
Yeah.
least in our conversations. And I
Right.
would fully agree there. And coming into my organization now, I mean, I had a very similar welcoming experience. And so I kind of forgot the question there. I was just trying
That's
to think back
okay.
to that example. So let's bring it back to that.
Yeah, no, it was more just like, is there anybody that you've heard that's had like a really great experience as a part of their interviewing process, or maybe something that they wish they would have considered or asked ahead of time? So, because I feel like a lot of times that can happen where maybe it's almost like in an interview process, it's almost like dating, like you're getting one side of things and then maybe you come in and things aren't quite what you thought they were going to be. I think the biggest thing that our organization with Zenith does is like, hey, we want, if suddenly it's not a good fit and maybe there was a piece of information you didn't think to ask, or maybe the work wasn't quite what it is, like speak up sooner than later, because
Yeah.
that whole thing is like, life is too short. You're exchanging a day of your life for this job. And if it's not fulfilling what you're looking for, like, don't be afraid to speak up and be like, hey, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I think employers, I mean, it's never a good time to quit a job for anybody, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you're unhappy, like you should speak up. And so maybe just, it sounds like he had a great experience and you did too, just kind of circling back, is working with an organization that's like, hey, we really want you to contribute. We want to help you grow. And with that, we want you to help us grow, kind of thing. And maybe a company just being transparent there. And maybe that's a good question that you could ask, be like, what do you anticipate my contributions to the company and your overall growth could be?
Hands down. Hands down. That's the perfect way to circle back to that. Yeah, transparency is a huge value to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned in my last career, I was going into that marketing job and I was like, hey, I want to learn as much as I can here, but I also have an interest here. So this is why I'm in grad school. I
Right.
think you're transparent up front in that process. The organization should be too. And in his experience, he's still at that organization. He says it's been great from the start. So
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of transparency, and I can honestly say the same about mine.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
yeah.
And so what did you, or do you feel it would be beneficial to be able to have a conversation with any employees at an organization before accepting a role? Because obviously a lot of times you're interviewing with like a management team or the hiring manager or something like that. We will bring in different salespeople if it's for a sales position, so that person can ask those questions. Do you see that happening in interview processes, or do you feel like that would be beneficial?
When I started my organization last year, yes, I had the opportunity to meet with more than one person. That wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily just in HR, and I think that's super beneficial. It gives the candidate a more perspective into the day-to-day job, and that's super important to know up front.
Mhm.
In past experience, a couple years back, I was on the other side where I was interviewing as well,
Mhm.
and I had candidates when they would come to me and they'd be like, "Hey, what is the day-to-day job? Who's on this team? Can I learn more about it?" That shows me they're taking initiative too, like they want to be there. So I think
Yeah.
it's beneficial for both.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I think the same, you could relate this easily to the home buying process. And just like looking at, when you're looking at homes, like, so in your job, you're like, you're going to be working with these people day to day. You're going to have to hang out with them a lot. Like, what's their experience? Do they enjoy their job? Because you certainly don't want to work with somebody that hates their job. Like, that doesn't, especially as a new employee, you'd be like, wow, what did I get myself into? I think the same could be true about housing, because I have a rule after one of my home buying experiences where I would be like, yeah, I'm just going to stand outside and smell. And which sounds super weird, but I found out too late, that the person next door smoked, and the smoke would just like waft into my yard. I'm like, oh, this is such a bummer. And so I think that's an important point. It's like with employment, like, check out your surroundings. You're probably interviewing at the office. Like, what's the experience like? What's the morale look like? I think you can do the same thing with housing, is just look around the neighborhood. What's parked out front? How are people taking care of their yards and things like that? So it's all just, it's part of its environment. It's definitely personnel and things like that. So I think you can relate. And I didn't mean to do this, but now I'm glad that I did. I think you can relate, like, interviewing for new positions very easily to the home buying experience, and just like, where are you going to be and who are you going to be spending time with?
Yeah, I fully agree. That kind of just reminded me of a story in my home buying experience where there was a listing sight unseen, but I was like, I need to go see it. And sure enough, you walk in and you smell the smoke from next door. So that is not a first time situation. Yeah, bringing it back to career or home buying, get as much information as you can up front.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to set you up best for long-term success. Like, you're stuck with your home for a while.
Yeah.
And me personally, I want to stay somewhere in my career for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want that stability and loyalty, and I'm very grateful I've found that. And I can also say in my home too, my home buying process, I was very picky in a market with such limited inventory, but like, sometimes you have to know upfront your deal breakers. You have to know, if my house is going to smell like smoke, is that something I really want,
Right.
Like, I'm going to be living in that every day.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question, is like, are you still, now that you've moved into your home, obviously we know you like your career because you've spoken very highly about your new position and where you're working, what you're doing. Yeah. How are you feeling now? It's been almost a year, I think, a little over maybe.
Time flies. It's crazy. It'll be this summer.
Yeah. So we're almost at a year. So are you still liking it? Are you happy with your decision?
I'm very happy with my decision.
Awesome.
I feel stable.
Good.
Just in one place. I am learning so much about being a homeowner. And I mean, I haven't fully lived here in the space for a year. As you mentioned, there was my close date and possession date were different. And so I still feel like I'm getting settled. You can see there's like no art on the walls yet because I've ordered it, and like the state of the economy, a lot of things are backed up right now, but it's just patience and just willing to work with, with that. And I feel settled, and I feel like I'm still getting very settled.
Oh, good. Yeah. Awesome. Well, and I think it's all what's nice about the home ownership piece, and same thing is true with employment. Once you're like, okay, this is home, then you've got plenty of time to make it a little bit more yours. You've time to like learn and grow into it and things like that. So I appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's super helpful. I get clients all the time who ask questions around, should I be even considering a career change or a job change during this process? And I think you brought up some really great points to consider. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And to anybody who's listening to this, if you are having a career change, and there's like all that paperwork you have to deal with HR, and then also getting pre-approved and whatnot, like Jacqueline will take care of it.
Thank you.
So much easier for me, because I was like, do I have to get this from HR and then go through this whole process again? It was very easy to work with Zenith. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And I hope that my insight with my career change during the home buying process is beneficial to anybody who might be going through that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks. We'll see you.